Welcome back, guys. Sorry about those technical glitches. I think we're good to go now, and we're going to let David actually pick it up right where we left off from the last video. So, David?
Thank you. And I wish RCA would stop praying for technical problems, please.
And I love this. I love being interrogated like this.
Good. So, yeah, and you're being a great about it, so I appreciate that too.
Oh, yeah.
So what I was really getting at the end of the other one was believing that all Scripture is God-breathed, meaning it comes from the breath of God. This would tie us back to, even if it was somehow inspired, I don't know that someone could get a wrong interpretation from something that was inspired, maybe, right? Or unless they made a mistake. So even if it is only inspired, I don't know how you get that connection, but let's just assume that's right. And that means the God you worship inspired or breathed the verse that says to kill a man who lies with another man. And it doesn't just say to kill him. It says to kill him, to stone him to death with stones. And the way we know they did that was to bury them up their neck and rock at their face until they died. And then it says their blood shall be upon their heads. All Israel shall hear and fear. You do this to keep the evil away from among you, which is also God inspiring a verse that's saying that homosexuality is evil. And even if we don't somehow, even if you work it into this new covenant idea, let's say Jesus was wrong. I'm not supposed to say that, I understand. But let's say the Matthew 5:17 through 20 thing is not an issue at all. Even if you got rid of that, what you end with is a new covenant with a God who inspired the killing of gays. And then if you say, well, at one time he thought that was bad and now he has changed, I would have to point you to Malachi 3:6. It says, I, the Lord, do not change. So if God wanted gays to be killed then, whether Jesus showed up or not, God wants gays to be killed today. And it seems that he is very hateful when it comes to that. So this sort of brings us back to this combination of either the Bible is infallible or it's right, and God is a terrible being that is raining havoc with people.
Go ahead, RCA.
Well, again, it's not just for teaching. It's for proof, for correction, and training in righteousness, that the man of work may be complete, equipped for every good work. So there's things that we can learn about. It's not just in terms of doctrine, but for all kinds of things concerning what the Scriptures, even the Old Testament, states. And what we see in the Old Testament is not just an issue of the history of how God has worked within his chosen people, but also in the matter of the prophecies that would be recorded that Jesus, who is in the New Testament, ends up fulfilling, and all of that. So again, the issue of the Old Testament being God-breathed, being God-inspired, it's still infallible in that regards, but it's the issue of it is that the laws do not fall down upon us. But going to the main issue is when you, because I noticed this whenever you brought up the issue about the homosexuality and all these other things, that there still seems to be a needing to understand how we define that. Rather we, for example, let's say we both think that the Bible is wrong and that it's immoral. How do we know? What standard would we say? You said it was common sense, that we inherently know that it is wrong. And I would ask, how do we know that it is inherently wrong? And you mentioned, is it focused on pain? Well, if that's the case, what about the masochists who do enjoy pain? And there's even, people that I'm pretty sure that who go around that can be serial killers, that one of the main motivations is to get people to feel pain and have that as sort of joy, that they feel like they're doing good because that they, instead of seeing pain as a negative, they see pain as a positive, and that's their justification on how they see it as right.
I never said pain. You're arguing with a straw man version of me.
Yeah, I'm not sure we went with that either.
The issue was about the concerning in whenever we were talking about the analogy, when we went to the analogy that about getting a daughter to spell something right and cut your hand off. You did mention the issue that after you said we know it is inherently wrong, common sense that we know it's inherently wrong, you did mention something, the issue about that it causes pain as another motivation as to why it's wrong.
Yeah, I talked about harm. I want to bring up, I'm about to answer your question, finally. I know you've asked a couple of times, But I do want to bring up something that's a little bit of a contradiction that you just said, and I want to give you a moment to think about it as I answer. You said the Bible is still infallible because it was inspired. But a moment ago, I guess in the other video, you said you clearly acknowledge that the Bible is a flat earth book because it has a human fingerprint. So how can it both be an infallible book with a human fingerprint that has mistakes in it like the earth is flat? You can't have both. Either it's got a human fingerprint and it's fallible, which calls a lot of things into question, or it's all God inspired and it's infallible, which means is the verse that says the Bible is that the earth is flat, is that inspired by God? If it is, then God is wrong demonstrably. If it's not inspired, then that means 2 Timothy 3:16 is wrong. And not all scripture is God-breathed or even inspired, right? So as much as I want you to answer that, I promised I would answer your question, so I'm going to answer that.
Right.
But I want to throw that. If you want to stop and answer, I'm fine. I just don't want you to think I'm avoiding your question again.
Well, I just want to answer quickly that the view on this I get is from people like, for example, John H. Walton and Dr. Michael Heiser concerning the issue, is that God sees that the people had these primitive thoughts in terms of pre-scientific ideas, such as not just that, they also thought that the I think it's either the kidneys or the intestines was what controlled thoughts and emotions. And that's written somewhere within the Bible about that. And then you have the issue of a tiny human being in a sperm cell in the testicles of another man. That's in the Bible when it talks about a man met Melchizedek while he was still in the loins of his father Abraham, so that it treats him still as a human being, yet he's still in the testicular area. So all these ideas are still there, but the issue is not that doesn't mean that negates infallibility, because the doctrine of infallibility is dealing specifically with the issue of God, and it's using human knowledge to relay theological truths, which is everything I try to point out to those who are identifying as flat earthers, for example, is that they try to say that this means that it's trying to prove flat earth. It says this is true to that, and I'm saying no. God is trying to get out the message that he is the creator of the world, and if he was to try to describe it as, a globe earth and all this, then all of them would be unable to comprehend the message. They would be at a shock because they're seeing that their ideas are changed. And so he says, you know what? How about this? I'm just going to relay it to these people on their own language, on their own terms, and in what they comprehend, so that at least they can understand that the creator of the world that they perceive is indeed me, Yahweh. And he used this also as a polemic against the other ancient Near Eastern religions and views that still had that same flat earth cosmology in mind, but was ascribed a different God to it. So the issue of the infallibility does not go to every single specific knowledge, but rather it's focusing on the issue of the theology, of the divine aspect.
So when God inspires a verse that has a scientific mistake in it, how do you reconcile that?
Simple. That, like I said earlier, that he is using the knowledge that they had to relay an infallible knowledge about the creator, about God himself. And by the way, I'm just now noticing this. If y'all didn't hear that, that is the lightning going around. So if my power cuts out, if I get disconnected, y'all will know it's because of a blackout.
I was wondering if somebody was breathing really heavy.
I was like, somebody getting shot or something. So let me ask you, RC, if I can, because I just kind of bring it back a bit. And I know we're having some more audio problems. Some people can hear, some people may not. We're going to try to muddle through it. I think Will Lane is working on this, so we know that the video is frozen again. But RC, let me ask you a quick. When we're talking about the infallibility of the Bible, and we're talking not so much about the science stuff. I mean, I think most people agree right now there is evidence in there that the people there probably were flat earthers. Okay, whatever. But when we're talking about things that have led to confusion, such as, is being gay right or wrong? I think when it comes, and try to bring it back to the problem of evil, why did God allow so much confusion to exist in regards to questions like that? If he's not the author of confusion, and if he's a good, benevolent being, then he should want, right? There's an ought there. He ought to want to have the best possible world where there's there's no evil, but let's say that there is some, because the evidential problem evil is a probabilistic argument towards God. Why did he particularly allow this possible world to exist where he had that particular thing where, you know what, I'm going to let them be confused about this particular thing. Some people are going to think homosexuality is wrong because of Leviticus. Some people are going to think it's right because of their interpretation. Why did God allow that to happen?
As far as why did he allow this to happen, I don't know all the answers in regards to that, and I have no problem with that, because I think that some things can be resolved for good, even though I may not suddenly see it at times, but I could probably see them within the future states. But as far as why did he allow these certain things to happen, that is beyond my knowledge at that point concerning that.
And let me go over to David real quick, because I know people will probably, if we don't address this, people will probably come back and ask why. I'm gonna let David have an opportunity to answer the question that he was getting ready to a second ago, just so we can not forget about that.
Yeah, sure. So my standard of morality, I mean, aside from being I don't even like really talking about it, because even according to Christian morality and Christian standards, if God were to be on earth doing the things that are ascribed to him in the Bible, he would be considered immoral. That's plain and simple. But if God did it 4,000 years ago and it was written down in a language we don't read and then we had to translate it, suddenly somehow God said it and it makes it okay. I can't wrap my head around that. I think God is just as guilty of being a monster, whether he did it 4,000 to 6,000 years ago or did it, in the middle of Main Street today. But I'll say the common sense version of a standard of morality or a basis for morality is essentially, and now we're talking about human morality here. I'm not necessarily talking about animals, and I've realized that this theory fails or this hypothesis really fails when we start talking about animals. But I'll say, as far as human suffering goes, the standard is human suffering versus human flourishing. Everything that happens is going to have one or the other. And the mechanism by which to judge this, unbiasedly, is the veil of ignorance. So you put someone behind a veil, they don't know if they're going to be the rapist or the victim. You put them behind the veil and say, do you want to be involved in this situation? You don't know which one you're going to be. Do you want sounds like we're into some sort of subjective argument, but that's not what it is. The veil is removing the bias. You don't know if you're going to have the power or if you're going to be the victim being controlled. And then that lets you realize the facts of reality, that raping someone is wrong. Not because I don't want it to happen to me, that becomes subjective. The veil is the mechanism to remove the bias. So you can take anything in the Bible and ask, would God have traded places with them? Would God have traded places with the man he made his bowels fall out of him? Would God have traded places with one of the infants that was going to be slaughtered at his command in 1 Samuel 15:3? Right? Would God wanted to have traded places with one of the cheetahs that was drowned when he decided to flood the earth? God wouldn't. If God had been behind a veil of ignorance, the facts of reality would have let him know, you know what, I wouldn't choose to be the baby because I don't want to die. I wouldn't choose to be one of the residents of Sodom and Gomorrah because I don't want fire and brimstone to rain down upon me and burn my city down. Do you think he would have traded places with Lot's wife and allowed himself to be turned into salt? No, he wouldn't have done that. Why? Because he knows those things are wrong. So again, human flourishing versus human suffering, it's a scale, right? So you talk about a dentist chair. Yes, you're going to get stabbed in the face with a needle. Sounds terrible. But that human suffering that is going to take place is outweighed by the human flourishing that's going to come out on the other side when your cavity is repaired, right? So again, there is some human suffering, but it's outweighed by the flourishing. A serial killer, it's all suffering, no flourishing. You have one person who feels good about it, several people who are killed. If you take that serial killer and put him behind the veil of ignorance, he doesn't know if he's going to be the killer or one of the victims. It becomes very clear because the bias has been removed. So that's the standard, and that's the mechanism by which to judge. And that's how I can confidently say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, even within an objective moral landscape, that the things God has done in the Old Testament, like killing all of the firstborn to convince the Pharaoh to let the people go, is objectively morally wrong by a humanist standard, by an atheist standard, by a Muslim standard, a Jewish standard, and even a Christian standard. God's behavior is abhorrent.
And what say you, RCA?
I would find that interesting that, he defined the answer for where the morality is coming from is the issue of human flourishing and versus human suffering. Is then how do we define, the issue of flourishing and suffering? Because some people would say that, depending on who you talk with, yes, we can see some common ideas in that, like removing the cavity and all that kind of stuff. Then you have the issue that some people, for example, that they say that when they kill somebody, they are flourishing the person, they're setting them free. For some of the psycho killers, that they believe that they're doing something that is morally right by setting them free into a new life that is eternal and better. Depends on the kind of kill you have, because you've had different motivations over time. And that's their motivation for it. But we could say, for example, I think you and me, David, would say that them people are still suffering regardless in that, and that is no justification to cause that.
Right. So you're kind of getting into what they believe, and I just want to be clear as you continue talking, that this isn't about one's belief. It's about recognizing the facts of reality, that torturing a baby for your own fun may do you pleasure, but causes the baby more harm than you get to flourish. So that's, it's objectively moral wrong, and the mechanism by which to judge that is the veil of ignorance. You and the baby,
right? And that's
in the veil. You're about to go out there. One of you is going to be tortured. It removes the bias. It's very clear that that's the wrong thing to do.
Right, and that's why I wasn't trying to suggest that you're subjective in that regard. You clearly made that well laid out. And that's why I'm trying to understand what is then the objective view, because then that's the case. If you're saying that the objective morality is the issue of flourishing versus suffering, then by that standard, how do we define then what is truly flourishing and what is suffering on those standards, if it is objective, meaning that it is not just a personal opinion, as some people will say, but that it is all that is well established. There's no getting around that. There's no debating about it. It's objective, and all people know this.
I think you're kind of missing Dave's point here, because he's putting it from an objective framework from God's point of view, not from the relativist point of view of an individual. He's saying God is maintaining a balance between flourishing and harms. Okay, so the evidential problem evil, which is the topic. It basically goes along the lines of, why is there so much evil? Why is there any evil? Why is there so much evil? And why is there horrific evil? There's different levels. Good and God accomplish the same things without having so much evil in the world. Could he have not just said, you know what, I want people to learn a little bit. I want to be a dichotomy. They understand good. They have to understand evil. And you can make this argument.
I think there has to be some sort of what we would call evil.
Okay, but why so much? Why? I can experience stubbing my toe, and that would be an evil, and know the difference between good and evil. There could be minor things, but why is there so much horrific evil in the world? That's the evidential problem of evil, kind of in a roundabout nutshell. So why is it that God has to have that much amount of evil to find this to be the best possible world that He created, and then commands it to be the way? That's how it kind of flows.
Well,
David, is that okay? I don't want to run your argument, David. Is that make sense?
That's great. I have an idea on how he can respond, but I'll let it.
Well, the way I would see it is that I think there can be a necessary evil, if you would.
But I didn't say necessary evil.
Well, I'm talking about whether that's so much or not.
But necessary means that there is evil. I want to know why there's so much evil. Why is it this much evil rather than there's a necessity to be evil, to have evil in the world? I mean, obviously, if this is a necessary world, you can argue the argument from contingency, but it's still that God created this world out of all possible worlds. He created this one, right? So why is it that this world, contingent upon what He wanted, has that much evil in it rather than that much?
And the reason why, I think, is because order, concerning that issue for the universe, that there is a sort of a balance that needs to be established. Like there's chaos, and then whenever there's chaos, then there becomes order. As John Frame notes concerning this specific argument, that an orderly universe in this idea is a universe governed predictably by natural law, but natural laws are impersonal. The law of gravity, for example, takes no account of persons. If someone was to jump from a high cliff, he will be hurt, whether he is righteous or wicked. If God miraculously protected everybody for those otherwise righteous who took foolish chances, it would be difficult to predict the events of nature scientifically. So I think the issue is about allowing the idea of an order to be established. So while there is still some evil, the evil can, while besides government and such, for example, to help prevent anarchy, that there can also be a balance within the universe, and that life can still be established in terms of not overpopulation, for example, or any other kind of outcomes and possibilities that we can focus on in terms of the factors being taken into accountability. This is one of the things that usually focus on when it concerns to, okay, something evil happened, but then people try to ask that question, think of the good that comes out of it. But at the same time, we can still say that these things are still evils or that have occurred in the world.
Okay.
I'm sorry. It sounded a bit like, and maybe I misunderstood, that you were sort of hinting at genocide and childhood leukemia and tornadoes wiping out, hundreds of people at a time. Is some sort of good still because it's like population control?
That it can provide a good based on different aspects, not simply an issue concerning a population control. There are many things that can come in an aspect of that. Me and my brother have both been an issue of things that would be called a suffering or evil that has occurred, but we still end up getting a beneficial result out of it.
Okay, but you believe that God is all-powerful, right?
Yes.
So do you believe God could teach you those lessons, could control the population, could have all of these good things happen without evil?
Yeah, he can do that without any evil in the world in general.
As soon as you say that God needs or must have some sort of prerequisite in order to complete some other task, you're removing him from being all-powerful. So if you then say, no, he can do this stuff without the evil, then you're acknowledging he is choosing to introduce unnecessary evil, which makes him not worthy of worship.
Well, I think that you would see it as unnecessary, but in terms of why that would, for me, be seeming as if it's sort of contradictory with what I hold to, I'm not seeing that. The issue is that he can certainly do that. He can certainly do whatever he wants to.
I think you're not listening to Dave here, because I know exactly what Dave's saying. And
listen to Dave here, RCA.
You do acknowledge that God can accomplish these good things, whatever evil you've suffered or anything that you're dealing with, tornadoes, earthquakes, all of these things that have happened, childhood leukemia, terrible things.
Yes.
You believe that there are good things that come out of that.
There can be good things that come out of it, yes.
But then you also acknowledge God doesn't need that evil in order to accomplish those goods, correct?
He doesn't necessarily need them to.
Doesn't necessarily need them. He doesn't necessarily need them.
He can do anything he wants. He could snap his fingers like Thanos and something will occur.
Fantastic. Then that means, by that very definition, if he doesn't need it, it is unnecessary evil.
Yeah.
God doesn't need evil.
Which means he's Maleficent. He's evil deity at that point, RC. That's
right. He doesn't need evil for it to happen. So it is unnecessary. And so in Isaiah 45:7, when it tells us that God created evil, created calamity, created darkness, it was necessary. He didn't have to do this in order for these things to happen. So what would you say about someone who brought unnecessary evil into a world that didn't need it?
It's gratuitous evil.
Right, I would say that, yeah, I should blame you for bringing unnecessary evil in it, but I don't see that with God. I do not see that at all with what you had brought about, and I've understood your point. The reason why is because God is able to do whatever he wants,
right? And
if he chooses to do it this way, then so be it. That is the way he is establishing it.
Right, but he could be evil, though.
He could be evil, but the issue is of what the ability that he is using to permit himself on that, and he's choosing within his nature holiness, and is choosing good.
Is there evil in heaven?
Is there evil in heaven? No, he has limited evil from being in heaven.
Okay.
So evil is not in heaven.
Do people have free will in heaven?
I don't believe in free will, period. I don't even think we have free will.
Okay.
You're a Calvinist?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I wish
It just took you this long
Yeah.
to figure it out.
I wish you would have told me he was Calvinist when we started.
I made a joke right before we went on air. I said something about the 5 points. I made a 5 points reference.
Oh, I thought you were just being. I thought you were just joking. I didn't realize you were being. I heard you guys.
He's a Calvinist. He doesn't.
Oh
believe
no,
in-
he's
he's a
a
determinist. He's not an indeterminist. He doesn't accept libertarian free will.
Right.
Which again, going back to what David's going to talk about here in a second, RC.
well,
you kinda
what he
just
was
did-
going to talk about. It sounds like he's going in a completely different direction.
Well,
Now I can
it's
see
funny
I can
because
see his wheels
I
turning.
know
over.
where you're going to go. So Dave, go ahead and go on to this because RC, I think what he's going to go is he created a possible world that he didn't necessarily have to create because he could have created a world where it didn't have evil and that we didn't have free will, like heaven.
Right. I mean, you believe we love God in heaven, right?
That makes this
Yeah, but the
contingent,
worship
not
of
necessary.
God in heaven, yeah.
That's exactly it, man. That's what I meant right there. Is it makes this evil, all of this evil is just, it's an unnecessary contingency.
Right.
It's not required.
That's the problem of evil.
And that is the problem, is that the evil shouldn't exist, just like it doesn't exist in heaven. If you're able to have happiness and love God in heaven without any evil, why didn't he just make earth like that?
Simple, because humans had disobeyed God. He's going to make sure that they are responsible and accountable and punished for the actions of which includes the sinful nature that causes them to have, by their own nature, being in that hardened natural state, desiring wickedness.
You said we don't have free will in heaven. We don't have free will here.
Mhm.
Where did Satan?
Where did Satan come from? As far as from what I can tell, that he was one of the angels, and he ends up being cast down.
Why?
I forget exactly what the story is. I don't remember what exactly happened in regards to that.
You don't think he made a choice to turn against God and tried to rally the troops to take over heaven and was thrown out?
I don't recall that being in the Bible. I have to check a look at that.
Okay, well, if we don't have free will in heaven, how could Lucifer have chosen anything other than what God wanted him to?
Exactly, and I think that was the whole predestined part of it. I think everything.
So God
was predestined.
created Lucifer with a specific plan to turn against him so he could kick him out and he could go run the torture chamber?
I don't believe Lucifer is a name for the devil, but yeah, I mean, I think that he is created for a purpose of being cast down and is in hell.
What? Oh, that's so bizarre.
And I don't believe that he's a ruler or leader of a torture chamber. I think everyone, you don't even see anything really once you are in what we would call hell.
How is that different from annihilationism then?
Simple, because in annihilationism, your consciousness is ceasing. You would be actually aware of the darkness that you are seeing.
He's
Okay.
like Sheol. He's thinking like Sheol.
The
Well,
grave.
Not
dark
just,
place.
not just simply Sheol, but also the issue still carries on to what we would call Gehenna, the lake of fire. That is.
Okay, well, let's not get out. Let's let Dave finish his point. Let's not get too out of.
Yeah,
out
no,
of-
I mean, I'm pretty much done, I guess. I can't really go anywhere from there. If God is predetermining all of this, and if you acknowledge Isaiah 45:7 that God created evil, and you acknowledge that God created this angel of Satan and forced Satan to make some sort of abhorrent behavior that got him kicked out of heaven,
Mhm.
and you believe that God is forcing every decision, right? Every word that I say is because God is making me say it.
No, not that he's making you say like a puppet, that he's leaving you in the natural state, of which is highly, highly, highly predictable, that given any sort of factors that's around you, you will choose those decisions. So it's pretty much like cravings and desires at that point. So in other words, if one desires payback over, for example, simply forgiving and letting go, that person will most likely choose to go after and kill, or do some sort of payback instead of a simple forgive. And that was being within their natural state.
Wristwatch Clementine reverse recliner. Did God make me say that? Or did I make a choice to say it?
You made a choice to say that, but there's still a preordained terms in which you decide to use why those specific words that was in your vocabulary and in that order.
I made a choice, but there's preordained. What does that mean?
Meaning that while that you have, for example, things like you have those words in your vocabulary stored up within your brain, and why you chose those specific words in general and in that specific order. So you still made the choice, but the issue is that that's still there.
Right. You said I made a choice, though. So I had the free will. I could have said rocking chair instead of recliner. I could have said orange instead of clementine. I made a choice.
Exactly. So why didn't you say that?
Right, but then you do believe in free will, because I made a choice. Right.
My issue is a soft determinism. A compatibilism is what the view being.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you worship. So let me wrap this up then. So you believe in a God that created a world with evil. He created evil and put it in that world. He created Satan. He created calamity and darkness. He created leukemia. He created tornadoes.
Mm-hmm.
And he uses all of these things in some way to do some good and some bad. And that's just the way it is. And that's the Lord our God. So we bow our heads.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a defense of the problem of evil. That's acknowledging that God is a monster and he's scary enough that we better bow our heads or we're going to get it.
Well, I'm not trying to ever deny the issue of evil in regards to it. My whole thing is whether or not, concerning the problem of evil, how do we deal with evil? We can't get rid of it. That's quite clear. We can't try to make some defense.
Getting rid of religion would be a damn good start.
Yeah, and that's not his ultimate point, RC. His ultimate point is the fact that he allowed evil to even exist. Why is that worthy of worship? It can stop. It doesn't have to go to how do we deal with it, but why is it here? And why is that?
Right. And I pretty much explained that. I think even some of the things in evil.
Do you worship because he's powerful, or do you worship God because you honestly think he's good?
I worship him because he is God and that he is person who has created us, and that
even if
he is worthy of worship.
So even if you came to the realization that he was an evil monster who hated us, you would still worship him because he's God?
No, because I wouldn't say the issue of him being evil or a monster unless that was proven. If that's the point, that if he is established as someone who is evil, then would not be worshiping him, though I would still see that may be a foolish decision. But again, that would just be me being the fool then at that point.
Right. So why wouldn't you worship him? Because he was evil?
I don't know. I guess that's just a foolish part of me that wouldn't do that.
Right. Well, you would turn against him if you realized he was evil.
Right. And right now I don't see that is the case because so far the Bible has not established that to be the case, nor has any other arguments outside of it.
Give me an example of something God would have to do for you to say he now meets the qualification of evil.
Something that would contradict what he has established within both Old and New Testament.
Such as a specific example.
Now, I can't really give a specific example. It has to be something that has happened now that someone would have to provide that would convince me. I can't think of any right now.
Well, let me ask you this.
Not at the moment, no.
Okay.
What was Hitler evil?
Was Hitler evil? Yes. Because he has sinned, and when he sins, breaking the law of God, that is evil. That is a sin.
Have you sinned?
Yes, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God.
So you're evil.
I'd say everybody is, by nature.
You think Hitler is more evil than you?
Do I think Hitler is more evil than me? I'd say he was less restrained than me concerning how God let loose on his restraints compared to us.
That's a bad answer. It's a really bad answer.
You
I don't
mean
see how.
Because you basically said that the only thing that's keeping you from being a healer is some kind of restraint.
Right, that God is limiting the already extreme hatred and desire of sin that we have in our hearts.
I mean, I don't have any restraints keeping me from exterminating an entire race. Like there's nothing there to restrain. That hate's not there. You see,
We don't have the propensity to do that. We don't have the desire to do it.
There's nothing
Right,
restraining
not at the moment.
Do you?
Not,
I mean, do you have a desire to go out and run and kill people?
I
don't. I really
see
don't.
so at the
I'm a nice guy.
this is a bit bizarre. I mean, I mean, I hate to say this, but you've basically kind of made the case for him by answering that. What was telling for me was when he asked you, would you worship this God because he is worthy of worship, and is he good? And you didn't give an example of why he's good. You just went to, he is God. He made us. You skipped over giving an example of why he would be good in the light of all that evidence, and that
that's a fair point. Then
telling.
I did
Yeah, he's good by
I didn't hear
fiat.
that.
That's it.
Well, I believe he is good because he has established what is right and wrong, and that he is holy and that he is perfect.
That's
Well,
true.
I think we're just gonna kind of go in circles at this point. So I think that we've got what we needed to do here. I'm gonna let both of you kind of wrap up your sides, talk about your channels, anything you've got coming up, anything you want to plug, that sort of thing, and then Steve's got an announcement, and then we'll close out the show. But I just want to personally thank both of you for coming on. Great talk, and I really enjoyed it. So we'll start with Reformed Christian Apologist. I'm still getting used to saying that. So you go ahead and start us out.
You're doing good so far.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. First of all, I would like to thank Stevie Wonder. I'd like to thank Kyle. Again, jealous of the hair. I wish I actually had a decent amount of it. And to
That's a pet name for me, by the way. Guys. We have pet names for each other.
I really wanted to ask you: are you outside? Because it sounds
no.
Okay.
I live in a trailer, and it is just very thin walls.
Because it sounds like you're outside. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and also thank to David, who I think is one of the few atheists I've actually engaged in a debate dialogue like this before, and I think, in my opinion, is actually probably the one that's made me had to really do some thinking. So that's a good thing to always do concerning how we should engage in this, whether you be Christian or not. Dialogues like these are needed. So I thank you ahead of time for this, David. Ultimately, it's just if y'all want to check out my YouTube channel, feel free to do that. As well as for any upcoming events on the Christian Man's channel. If you follow me on Twitter or my Discord or any of that stuff, you'll be able to get information on when this will happen. It'll be Thursday. I plan on debating Dean Esme, otherwise known as Max Colby, on the issue of Protestantism versus Roman Catholicism on the Christian Man's channel. So there's that. It'll be a formally moderated one this time. That's no offense to you two guys. That's just one of the formats that I mostly prefer in debate format. But I'm not dissing. I enjoyed this conversation too.
It's okay.
Yep.
Taking that red pill.
I take white pills with blue letters on them. So
wait until next Thursday when you take that red pill. We're still getting over the side effects of that. Were you finished? I don't want to.
I'm finished. I'm
okay.
gonna go.
All right.
Be right back.
All right, David.
DavidCSmalley.com. That's it.
Short and to the point.
Well,
hey, awesome.
Things there. My comedy tours, my acting stuff, my everything. DavidCSmalley.com.
Well, I gotta say, I'm really kind of proud of you for admitting at the end of that RCA about how you learned something, because that's very rare in these sorts of discussions that somebody can concede that.
I don't know why you never admitted that over all the conversations you and I have had over the years, but whatever. I'm not going to take it personally.
No,
like that.
I got to tell you, he's a really good guy, and I can tell he's thinking about
Yes.
this stuff. And RCA, are we gonna call you that, like the Jacks, or can we just call you Reformed or weird like RCA? But yeah,
No, he's
I
going to have a symbol here in the next couple of days. There's going to be a symbol that Kyle
Like
does on
Prince.
it.
yeah, okay.
I
Well,
forgot.
I appreciate you doing it. Thank you for doing this today, and I appreciate your kind words as well. I mean, I think anytime you can leave a discussion thinking about your position, you're either going to come back stronger or abandon it for a better one, and either way is an improvement. So I wish you the best, man, and thank you, both of you guys, for having me on. I appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
Appreciate
Thank
both
you
of
for
being on.
coming. Okay, Steve, I'll let you say what you need to say, and then we'll close out. And we'll see you guys tomorrow. Remember at 8:30 on Godless Cranium's channel, and then Sunday we'll be back here at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I just want to throw out there that I'm going to be a guest on Mr. Atheist's channel. I have not been on his show before. It's going to be at 8 o'clock Pacific time, so in about 45 minutes. It's going to be me, Mark Vanderbrake, and AJ Holter. Not sure what we're going to be talking about, which is going to be interesting because I'm going in blind. They just said we're going to have fun. So come join us over at the Mr. Atheist channel. I'll put the link in the video description, and I'll put it also in the live feed. But I also want to thank both you guys for coming in. I think this was a great conversation. I'm glad that we went from the problem evil full circle back around to the problem evil, and I'm glad that we did end on the way that we did. I think you guys did an exceptional job, and I love listening to these kinds of conversations. So I just want to thank both of you from coming on and talking about it. This is not an easy topic, so
Yep.
my props to you.
Thank you guys, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, bye, guys. We'll see you 8:30 tomorrow. And